This is our part 3 of our series with Annie Storr as she's trying to get her shared images up. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Claflin, the Education and Communications Manager for the museum. I'll be the moderator for today's talk. I just wanted to let you guys know that this will be recorded and available later on our YouTube channel. I'm going to send out an email with that link and also some documents following up on this session. I will give a brief introduction of Annie, and then when she is ready, she's going to take over the session. And the format for the talk is pretty casual. We're going to have some participation. There's going to be new exercises introduced in case you've taken one of these workshops before. Annie has over 80 exercises in her book, Exercises for the Quiet Eye. And I'll just give a brief introduction while she's getting her PowerPoint up.
We really have got a problem. I will work on it.
Okay.
He's the woman behind the curtain.
And we're all in education, so we all know how to improvise, and it looks like we have some great new faces that are joining us today, so thank you for joining in. I just want to introduce everybody. Probably knows a little bit about Annie, but I'm going to give her an introduction in case you don't. She is the resident scholar for Women's Studies Research Center at Brandeis University. She teaches both art history and education, having devoted her career to exploring the intersection of the two disciplines. Her research areas are interdisciplinary art history, social history, museum studies, history of education, audience studies, and learning assessments. Dr. Storr developed exercises for the quiet eye, or EQE, to encourage patient reflection, appreciation, and an attempt to avoid to rush to understand or determine a set interpretation of what we see. Annie has done several workshops for us. I'm so happy to have her back for this part 3 series. And when she's ready.
I'm so sorry for this mess, but we will sort it out.
Okay. All right.
It worked fine. So
okay.
We seem to be catching on one image, but I'm just going to close everything else down.
Okay. Annie's going to use our current exhibitions for this exercise today. She's going to focus on Enrico Riley. We have a solo show of his work downstairs that actually tomorrow is the last day for it to be on view. In the chat section, I have put the link to the virtual exhibition, as well as the virtual exhibition for Impact, which is our upstairs show, which is running until November 20th. If you do have a chance to come on campus, we'd love to see you. However, anybody who is not part of the UNH community has to provide a COVID-19 negative test just to keep everybody safe. And you can contact me through my email to set up that visit.
And I think I have figured out what was wrong.
Okay.
I can figure out how to do it right. You should be seeing the title screen now. Is that correct?
We got it, Annie. Yes.
All right. Then, there you go. This is
okay. Beautiful.
Take a moment to gather and calm down from the technical glitches. And we'll just gather for a moment by looking. Sarah, I notice we have more in the waiting room. While you're looking, I'll say a little bit about exercises for the quiet eye, and I am smiling at the several people I see here today that I haven't seen in a while. Exercises for quiet eye grew out of the long-term practice of museum education and a whole cohort of people who have been concerned in that work that the biggest challenge that we probably have between the art that we look at and the experiences that people have is that we rush, and that in the few seconds, something like a quarter of a minute that most people spend looking at a work of art on average, you can't possibly integrate your sensory response to the work, your emotional response to the work, and your intellectual processing of the work. And so with a group of graduate students and faculty at the Corcoran Gallery of Art and Design in Washington for a decade, we worked on observing audiences and figuring out ways to slow the process down. And the outgrowth of that is what originally was called the Corcoran method of looking. And with the changes at the Corcoran has become exercises for the quiet eye. And that history I'm happy to chat about later, but it's not important. Out of the observations we made and the work that I've been doing on the gallery floor for quite a number of years came the idea of engaging viewers of art in several different ways, and to show them that they can look at art in different ways, and to teach them, if they would like to learn them, independent looking skills that they can take away with them. So imagine, if you will, that we're today in the Enrica Riley exhibition at the University of New Hampshire, and practicing different approaches to looking in ways that I hope will be engaging. And the whole idea is to slow it down. My particular hope is that we can emphasize today, among the many principles and goals that EQE has developed, that we're going to focus on the capacity of art to help us see the things we would otherwise not see, or seeing the unseen. It can be seeing the imaginary or seeing the hidden. And I'd also like to emphasize the capacity of art to help us as viewers develop an I-thou relationship with works of art. This is a concept from Martin Buber and going back to the mystics of the 14th century. But the idea that the humanity in us, and each of us is well, the humanity of me or of you, can recognize the humanity in a work of art. By which I want to be clear, I don't mean the humanity of the imagined artist, but rather the humanity that's embedded in the work of art. And if you are practitioners of yoga, this would be very close to developing a namaste relationship with what's in you that recognizes what is human in the work of art. So those would be the two things we focus on today. And because we can't be in the exhibit today in person, except for I think two of us probably could, we're going to first walk through artificially or virtually, walk through the entire exhibition so that you get a sense of what you would have seen if you'd come into the gallery and were walking around and waiting for a talk or a tour or to walk through it with a friend. But I want you to have a sense of the exhibit. And then we're going to do 3 and possibly 4 little exercises with selections from the show. So let's start by walking through, and I'll give you more than the 17 seconds per word to look at them. I can already tell that you'd like me to tell you what these are called. But one of the ground rules of EQE is to try to remove everything between you and the work. And I even get so radical sometimes that means taking off the label and just looking first. So you're going to just look, but this exhibition, as you know, is available with its labels and texts and so on through the links that Sarah has already given you. So let us stroll through. And rather than startle you, I'll say, and another. And next. And again. And another. And again. And the next. And again. And again. And again. And oh, excuse me. All right. So I'd like you to take a second and just do whatever you would do if you had just walked through an exhibit. So close your eyes, stretch your muscles, shift yourself around a little bit, stop and process. And then in a short moment, we'll do the first exercise. Now there are two major ground rules to exercises for the quiet eye. One is that nobody ever has to share. That if you really believe in developing the direct relationship and the independent looking and feeling of the viewer to the work of art, to make sure that it's as possible as can be, to just enter into a relationship with the work, then no one should be wondering what they're going to say if they're asked to. So I will, at the end of each exercise, ask if a person or two would like to tell us what they have been seeing. The idea is that this time is for you and for the art, and I will be I'll be as much behind the curtain as possible. The second ground rule is that you get to choose the work of art you look at. And this is the biggest limitation that we have found with the virtual environment. Normally, you would have strolled through the works you've just seen, and I would say, go find yourself something within the sound of my voice, and we'll do an exercise. The best we can do is to show you two works and to invite you to choose one or the other that you'd like to spend your few minutes with. For any of you who came through art history in college or something comparable, I just want to be clear that when I show you two images, they're not up on the screen so that you will compare and contrast. They're up on the screen so that you can choose which one you would like to focus on. And I've tried to mix up the work that we'll do exercises with, so you'll see some quite different things in the exhibition. So with your paper and pencil, here's your first exercise. I'd like you to take a moment to choose which one you'd like to focus on, spend a little time with. It is even helpful. Some people have said, if you want, to just grab an extra sheet of paper and cover the other one up on your screen. It won't do anybody else any harm. And then I'm going to ask you to write out a list of words, preferably adjectives, descriptors, a really short little expression, descriptive expressions. To write a list of adjectives that come to mind as you are looking. And if the words flow, just let them flow. We'll do this for several minutes. So if you have to go on to a second piece of paper, that's great. If you find that you're stalling out, I'm going to ask you to push through and get to at least 10. And I recommend you do it in the form of a column. You'll see why later. After you've had a chance to generate your words, your adjectives, I'll give you 2 more prompts about what to do with this list. So take your time. I'm going to be watching you, and until everybody looks bored, we're going to take as long as you want, because the idea is to slow down. Don't worry if they're the right words. Just write down the adjectives and the descriptors that come to mind. if you find that you're coming to a kind of to a stall, probably aren't, but if you are, let me recommend you just close your eyes, rest them, and then open them again and see if anything freshens up. In a minute, I'll give you another prompt. I'm going to do 2 more things with this list. Thank you, Sarah, for communicating with the person who just came in. All right. When you're ready, don't stop what you're doing if it's still flowing, but when you're ready, I'd like you to read down your list slowly and circle the 3 words of all those that you've written that seem to be the most significant, to say the most about your response to the work or about the work. And then in a moment, I'll give you 1 more prompt. So if you will, please read down your list again, slowly. And as you're reading down, pay attention to how you felt as you were making the list. And at the point in which you kind of stalled out or felt like your words were getting repetitive or far-fetched, or you only continued because I told you to, at that point in the list, I'd like you to put a line between the words. It's entirely possible it's all the way at the top or all the way at the bottom, but generally it's somewhere in the middle. Now at the end, I'll give you a suggestion of something else you can do with this list if you're interested. But that's just, if you want to take it further. Let me ask if there's anybody who would care to tell us which of the 2 works they looked at and would like to read their list for us. And as I say, if nobody does, that's completely fine. Joan, would you like to? And then Wendy? You're going to need to unmute yourself.
Oh, here I am. Hi, I'm
Hey, Jane.
Joan. Thank you very much for this exercise. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I found this to be a really powerful piece. It looks like it's the one on the left.
Mhm.
It's very painfully.
And let me ask you, just read your list.
Okay. Muscular, powerful, neutrals, hiding, preparing, joining, anticipation, alone, knife ready, well, holding, ready for freedom.
All right. And if you don't mind, tell me, what were the 3 words that you circled?
Powerful, anticipation, helping.
Thank you. And do you mind reading down the list one more time?
Uh-huh.
Tell me what the line was, and then just keep going.
Okay. Muscular, powerful, neutrals, hiding, preparing, joining, anticipation, then the line.
Hmm?
And then after that, alone, isolated, painful. I wrote too many words. White hand holding knife ready to
That's just fine.
create freedom.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you want to do the same thing? You'll need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
I chose the sketch,
Oh, good.
and my list is movement, thin, sadness, strength, determination, rain into light, sound, ease, certainty, and loose.
Thank you. And what were your 3?
Movement, determination, and rain into light. I'll hyphenate it so it's one word.
Yeah, of course. Whatever works. Now let me ask you to read your list one more time. Tell us where the line is, and then keep going.
Movement, thin, sadness, strength, determination, rain into light, sound, line, ease, certainty, loose.
Thank you. Let me tell you why I think this is such a good exercise. I recommend you do it anytime you're with art. At least do it once, to something that you see early on in your time in a museum or wherever you are. What you're looking at is a journal in real time of your reactions to the work. It's not really a list of words that you would put into an analytic essay. It's a record of your responses to the work. So you can learn about your own reactions to the work by watching what kinds of responses you have first and later and toward the end. And those 3 words are, of all the different reactions you had, those are the ones that really mattered the most to you. Right? They're the ones you'd probably say to someone else that you wanted to talk to or whatever. And that line, let's talk about that line. There's a lot of theory behind this, but that line is the point at which normally you would have walked away and gone to see another work of art. It's the point at which whatever your looking habits are, because different people have learned different ways of looking at art over the years, taught by different people or self-taught. That line is where your looking habits ran out, which is why you might very well walk away. In order to get past that line, you had to stretch. You had to do something you don't normally do looking at a work of art, even if it's just because I told you to. That's your second wind. And you can think of the ones that are above the line as your first impressions, and they're often important. Those below the line where you're stretching tend to be the responses where you were trying to integrate, where you were kind of sort of processing together. It's where you're beginning to do the work of making sense of the work of art. And to imagine that if you'd walked away where that line is, you would not have had the reactions that are below the line. One thing that we've learned over the years is that most people start with most of their circles above the line. And as they slow down and look at different kinds of works of art, the circles tend to drop down so that they're coming out of that second wind period. Isn't that neat? And I want to go on to a quite different exercise. So I'm going to ask you to take a small pause. Let me see if yes, just not look at those works for a minute. We'll take two more. The same thing will happen. I'm going to ask you to choose which of the two you would like to spend your time with. And then I'm going to walk you through this one. But as you are choosing, I'm going to ask you to be mindful of where your eye landed first on the work that you chose. And then I'll talk you through. So here are two more works by Enrico Riley. I'd like you to choose one, cover the other up if you want to. But in this exercise, I'd like you to be mindful of the path that your eye takes. Notice where your looking first landed, and then where your eye goes, what path it takes through the work. And should your eye pause, take a quick moment to ask yourself why. And then if it goes on like a Ouija board, just keeps on moving, just follow along, paying attention to that path until your eye comes to rest. And again, ask yourself why. There's one proviso I've had to learn to say, which is if you find that your eye is going around and around and around, when it's gone 3 times, just stop. You're done. It occasionally happens. So let's take some time with these. If you want, you can make a sketch of the path your eye took, or just be mindful of it and pay attention. You've got plenty of time. Whenever you find your eyes come to rest, just give your eyes a rest again by closing them for a moment and opening them. It'll take a little bit longer. All right. Has everyone had enough time? Just signal if you haven't. Okay. Let me ask if there's anyone who would like to tell us which work they looked at and describe the path that your eye took. Jane, would you do that? I'm delighted to say that Jane Piasecki and I have been colleagues for about 30 years. It's lovely to see you.
The path that my eyes took was,
Which did you choose?
I choose the coffin. Was my eye immediately went to the strength of the hands and the bolt that we see in between the two pairs of hands. It was very powerful. My eye then went to the hand all the way on the left-hand side and was curious as to why it's free. And then my eye went to the reflection on the top of the coffin. And then I was distracted by the white thing over here on the right-hand side because I can't figure out what it is. And that's where I stopped.
Is there anyone else who'd like to? Thank you, Jane. Anyone else who'd like to describe the path your eye took? Not I can tell you what's going on.
Annie, I'd like to share if nobody else wants
Yeah,
to.
please. Yeah, Sarah, thank you.
So I did the one on the left with the cards and the hands holding the cards. I started at the top of the cards reading the K and the Q, and then it brought me down to the thumb, and then around to the champagne glass, and then the purple shirt in the upper right hand corner, and then back down to almost the palm of the hand. And on my second take, my eyes traveled the same way, except it to the left hand corner of the necklace, and then to the hand with the ring on the right hand side, and back down to the first chip that's on the table, and then right to the two fingers that are underneath the card.
Is that where you paused?
That's where I paused, yeah.
When he was in his late 90s, a brilliant man named Rudolf Arnheim, who wrote a great deal about art and perception, wrote in 3 pages in some essays for educators that he gave at the Getty, the best description I've ever heard of the difference between seeing and looking. And to simplify, what Arnheim says is that what your eye does is see, and most human beings allow for difference in optical sight, see in essentially the same way. So when you look at a work of art and your eye starts at a point, we can talk about that later if you like, what we humans do is try to make sense of what we're seeing. So we start wherever we start, and then we look around to find something that will clue us in, something that will begin to make sense. And we land on something else, and we make a connection between those two, and then we keep going, trying to find the next thing that helps us make sense. Now, the artists have a certain amount of control over what path you're taking, but that we basically travel through a work of art, and that is not seeing, that's looking. Because the difference between seeing and looking is that looking is seeing plus thinking. And that as it is your mind that is directing how you look through a work of art as you try to understand what you're looking at and perhaps understand something deeper about it. What this means is that if two people look at the same work of art, they may very well start at the same place because the artist does have certain control over that. But as two people are looking, their minds are individual. And so they may look, the second thing they find may be different, that makes a different sense to them. And that gradually their paths will diverge from one another because the thought that is leading them is personal to each of them. And that it is literally possible for two or a group of people to look at the same work of art and see, to look at the same work of art and be seeing a different work of art because the journey they took through it is completely different and their understanding of it will be completely different. If we were in the gallery together, I would have paired you up and have you show each other the different path you took. And what you would find yourself talking about is the difference in how you understood the work. It is entirely possible for a person to miss, in a portrait of a family of 7, to miss 3 of the people, or the fact that it's indoors or outdoors, or anything else about it. So I've learned that to understand that the way you look at a work of art is by traveling through it is very important to understanding your relationship to that work of art. Now, in the interest of time, I want to move on to another exercise. So let's do, this is a shorter one. We're going to take a small applause, just cleanse your eyes like a sorbet. And then again, I'm going to ask you to choose which work of art you'd like to give your time to. And this is a fairly short exercise. I would say that in the first one, we looked for about 30 times the normal looking time. And in the second exercise, about 20. This time, maybe just 8 or 10 times. But once you've chosen which work of art you'd like to pay attention to, I'd like you to give it a long, leisurely look. If you want, generate adjectives in the back of your head or pay attention to the path your eye is taking, or however you want to take in the whole work. And what I'll ask you to do in a minute is to close your eyes and to think about what song is in your mind, or what the words of the opening line of a song that you might write would be in response to either work of art. I'm not asking you that yet, but I will in a moment. And I will mute because of my dog barking. When you're ready, close your eyes and think about what song or piece of music comes to mind, or what words you would start the first lines of a song if you were to write it based on this work of art. And because you're all mute, you can actually sing it back to the work of art if you would like to. And we'll take a minute for that. In the interest of time, let's move on and do one more exercise. I consider the music in our hearts pretty private stuff, so I'm not going to ask for volunteers this time. So take a pause. And I have to admit that on this one, I had trouble choosing between two different activities. But again, I'm going to ask you to choose which of two works you would like to attend to. And then I think we're going to write a little bit of poetry. And again, you don't have to share it. So choose which work you'd like to focus on. And then I'd like you to do something specific with regard to writing a few lines of poetry. I would like you to write 2 couplets of poetry. A couplet is roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. It's 2 lines. And one of these couplets, I would like the one I just gave you, to rhyme and to end with 2 words that sort of in spirit or mood belong with each other. Moon and June. The other couplet, I would like you to write, and I want it not to rhyme, and to end with 2 words that are as opposite as you can think of. And we have a few minutes, but not enough to write a whole poem. So if you find that this is easier, just get those last 2 words. The ending words for a couplet that rhymes and ends in 2 words that belong with each other, and the last 2 words of a couplet that did not rhyme and ends in 2 words that are as opposite or contrasting as you can make them. And we'll take some time for this, but we will be sure to wind down in time too. I'll be sure to stop you in time, even if you're not finished, in time to have a moment to wind down. So 2 different couplets. They're not part of the same poem. If you find it helps, take a moment and shake your shoulders or close your eyes and then let it roll again. We're going to take a couple more minutes. It's not hardly enough time to write real and good poetry, even just 2 couplets, but at least you can have the experience of starting. And if you're quite done and wonder why you're waiting, just remember how often in our lives we wish we had 2 minutes just to sigh and decompress. In a few moments, I'll ask if there's anybody who would like to read us their scratchings, or even just their final pairs of words. Is there anyone who'd like to share? Wendy, would you care to? You'll have to unmute.
Yep. I did the band, the brass band, and kind of failed in the rhyming one, but this is the last 2 words. Maybe they are close together, I don't know. Brass in the band, one believes, one cannot understand. And the second one, I like the last 2 letters best. Grief's joyful noise, bright yellow brass amid black light.
Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to share? All right, Denise, would you? Thank you.
I did the same one. Be so loud and show how proud, transforming pipes so hard and cold to make sounds so expressive.
You were having some audio blockage.
Both be so loud and show how proud, transforming pipes so hard and cold to make sounds expressive.
So much. I promised myself we're going to take a minute to wind down, and I just apologize that my technical glitches lost us a few minutes at the beginning. But let me tell you why there are, among the various exercises for the quiet eye, there are 6 that involve using poetry, but they're different tasks. This particular one does something that was basic to what EQE started out trying to do with the Corcoran, which was to make sure that you got past your first impressions. So by definition, giving you 2 different sets of instructions requires you to have one set of responses to the work and form them into something homogeneous, and a second response to the work that encourages you to form them into something more dissonant. So I want to ask you to do this. Would you please circle the one that is closest to your actual authentic response to the work? Because that's the one that will be true to your relationship to the work. But I pushed you to have not just a first reaction, but a couple, and then go back and reflect. The thing about poetry is that, at least in our Western culture, it calls us to do two things at once. Each poetic form has its own intellectual structures and forms, and so it puts your mind to work. But we also associate poetry with emotion, and so it's asking you to integrate those two aspects. And most of these exercises integrate at least two of the sensory, the emotional, and intellectual. And so by juggling them, mixing them up, you do different things. That's all we have time for, but I would like us to take a moment to go back and just wind down a little bit together by looking at this. And when you've had a minute, EQE is officially over, and I will thank you for coming, but I'm not going anywhere. So if you have questions for me or for Sarah afterwards about the show or about the method, I'm happy to stay and chat. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Next week, we'll be having part 4 with Annie. I'll send you a follow-up email with the YouTube link for this recording and also her document to follow up for this session, and a link for next week. She'll be doing something and introducing something
Completely different.
different. So please register. You can always learn something from Annie. I learn something from her every time we have a session. She is a plethora of information, and she's just so professionally generous that I love to take advantage of her workshops. So I hope you do too, and pass it along to anybody who you think will be interested. So thank you so much. I'm sorry we went over about 3 minutes in time, but Annie, thank you so much. You're a joy. I love it.
Next week, we're going to be doing the exhibition called Impact, which is something completely different, but that's about half the time. The other half of the time, we're going to be looking at a technique that has developed in the virtual world called triptych, and it is something you can do using the basic principles of EQE at home with whatever art you have there. So that's what we'll do next week.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, everybody.
Sarah,
Yes.
is it possible to get access to lessons 1 and 2?
Yes, we have recorded all of them, and so I'll send you that link.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us, Jane.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.